It's great to see you, and I'm going to start my talk tonight letting you know that I'll be issuing a challenge when I'm done. So get ready, because the challenge is coming. And I'm issuing that challenge because I know this community. I know many of you, and I know people just like you. And I want you to know that I know you are successful. You're the winners. The school systems have worked for you. And if they didn't work for you, you figured out your way around them. You're the success stories in our community. And it's important for you to know that I know that about you. I'll get to that later. About 25 years ago, I started my career working in Chicago in urban school reform. And when I worked in Chicago, it was a thrilling time because we thought that we could fix the schools in that city. And I learned a lot about power, and I learned a lot about money, and I learned a lot about politics. I didn't learn much about teaching and learning, but I did learn a lot about what the big movements look like to get change to happen. After I worked in Chicago, I came back to New Mexico. Now I'm from Albuquerque, and I grew up about a half a mile from here. And when I worked in New Mexico, I worked for the New Mexico Legislature, and I learned one very, very important thing, and that's how to be a skeptic. Being a skeptic is a good thing, especially if you're a policy person, because not all policies are the same. We don't want to support things that cost public money that don't work. So I learned to be a skeptic. And I learned that the data matters, and I learned that outcomes are real, and they have real effects for real people. Now, that was about 20 years ago. Let's fast forward. What's happened in the last 20 years? Have we been successful? 20 years ago, fourth grade reading scores, about 20% of our kids were proficient in reading. That hasn't changed in the last 20 years. Graduation rates, 63% 8 years ago when we started keeping track of four-year cohort graduation data. That hasn't changed either. So we have to ask ourselves, what happened over the last 20 years that hasn't resulted in any success or little success? And I would argue that what we've done over the last 20 years is we've focused relentlessly on the outputs. How can we make our schools better? By raising expectations for them. And that strategy has not borne any fruit. We are no better than we were 20 years ago. Now, we have to think about what are we missing? And what we're missing is some dedication to the inputs. What are the inputs of education that will change the outputs? Simply raising expectations for schools that aren't working is not going to change those schools. Now, Ted Sizer, who is a brilliant educational theorist, I think cursed me when he said, for one thing to change, everything must change. For one thing to change, everything must change. And what he meant was the 7-period day, the 182-day school year, the compartmentalized curriculum, the teachers teaching in their own classrooms without any knowledge of what the guy next door to them was doing, much less collaboration. So, for one thing to change, everything must change. And we must think about our high schools in a new way, a new frame of reference for school. We can't tinker with them. We can't layer more programs on top of dysfunctional structures and dysfunctional systems. They need to be reinvented. They need to be recreated. We need a new frame of reference. Now, I've tried to do that in my new school, which is called ACE Leadership High School, and it's an architecture, construction, and engineering school. And if you come to that school, it will feel like you're on a job site or in a design studio in the best way, where kids learn to think like engineers and they learn to think like tradespeople. They learn to think like architects and they learn to think like plumbers, carpenters, electricians, because that's real problem solving. That's a depth of understanding about how to solve problems, and that's what's needed. And it's particularly needed for the 40% of kids who don't graduate from high school. 40% do not graduate from high school. And among Latino boys, it's criminal. We need to fix that, and we need a new frame of reference to make that happen. Now, I have some good news. And the good news is all of you are smart, and you care about what's happening. We also have an unbelievable, untapped reservoir of goodwill in our community. People want our schools to succeed. And they particularly want our schools to succeed for the kids who are the most vulnerable, the kids who need a great education the most. They want those schools to be better, and they want those kids to be served. Now, like Caesar said, it's all got to change. There is no tinkering in order to fix this problem. So, that's going to take courage. It's going to take fortitude. And it's not for the weak stomach to do it. Now, I'm going to tell you something that's personal about me. I'm a Catholic, everybody. And as a Catholic, I go to confession. But I never confess for the things I've done wrong. I do them, but I never confess them. Because I confess for the things that I don't have the courage to do right in the future. That's a much more powerful way to think about your own obligation to your own community. Confess for the things that you know you're not going to do, even though they need to be done. That's real courage, and it's what this community needs. Now, there's a good thing about Catholic guilt. There is a good thing about it, because you don't want to look back when you're retired, and you don't want to say, I left that community no better than I found it, because I didn't have the courage to do anything about it. So I ask you to join me. Let's get rid of that guilt. And let's go on like Buddhists, right? Let's go on and create a community that understands that for one thing to change, everything must change. Thank you.